We let the world burn for you. Agenda Piece, episode 4. We're back. Best backstory in One Piece. That is the question. That is the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, you got yours truly. And today, I have a tournament bracket to discuss the best backstory in One Piece. Now, here's the bracket. I got some of the most notable backstories here. It is very up to date to the manga, so if you're not caught up, well, I don't want to spoil you, so you probably don't want to watch this or listen to this. And this is because there's no chapter talk about One Piece this week, but there was an interesting conversation last week from one regarding One Piece, and that is what is the best backstory in One Piece. What's good, Dave? I'll put this in the chat. Anybody who wants to discuss this conversation, feel free. The boys are busy, but we still got to talk about agendas. So here's the list. I'm going to randomize a little bit. And we're going to get started right into it. So this tournament bracket includes names like Frankie, Karos. I'm not going to name all of them. And we're just going to dissect it. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to discuss which backstories are better. And the first matchup we got here today is Frankie versus Karos. So Frankie's backstory is obviously what happened in, what was it, Water 7, Enies Lobby. It's a situation with I forget Big Boy's name, and his brother, and how Big Boy, who adopted Frankie for the most part because they were both kind of like orphans, got taken out. And because did he already build Pluton? Man, I'm gonna have to remember it. I don't have the One Piece encyclopedia who's read the series like 3 times, and Miles here. It's been a while since I read Enies Lobby, but I remember that backstory being very impactful, and the death of our boy was impactful as well as the introduction of one of the ancient weapons. Compare that to Karos. I mean, the whole thing finding out the toy, the reason why he's attached to Rebecca is because that's her father. That moved me. We also got the situation where we find out how he got turned into a toy, the kind of shady, dark drama or the shady, dark backstory of these toys being turned by sugar, and then their families forgetting who they are, and they're basically doing slave labor. The Frankie stuff hit, but like the darkness of that backstory hits a little bit more. I'm gonna say Kiros's backstory. I'm gonna say that one is better. I'm gonna go Kiros here. So I'm gonna say Kiros's backstory is better than Frankie's. I think for the most part, you can argue that Frankie's backstory is more important, especially what is Frankie's dad's name? Why am I forgetting it? Uh, Frankie dad. Oh yeah, everybody thinks it's Queen. That's hilarious. Frankie's dad is Queen, obviously, and that has been confirmed by Oda. But what is his adopted dad's name? That's where I'm trying to remember. Tom. I knew it was a simplistic name. I was thinking like Ed for something for some reason. So Tom and Pluton, that was super important to know because I'm sure that's going to have a very important effect on One Piece moving forward. But in terms of like the narrative, I was more drawn in from what happened with Kiros in particular. Next, we got Law and Doflamingo. I basically combined the backstories because they're very much intertwined. I don't know if I should have combined it. I probably should have separated it. Now I'm thinking about it. But I think they're very one and the same. And then you throw Coruscant in there. We got Doflamingo when it comes down to him and his dad and his family going down from the Celestial Dragons. We had the people going like, hey, you were Celestial Dragons. You're rich scumbags. We're going to take you out. They were beating on him. Doflamingo turned insane. And then he became a straight out badass and a leader of his own crew. And then we find out Coruscant and his relationship with the Marines and how he was spying on Doflamingo. And Doflamingo basically became his own little mini mafia boss. I agree, Dave. And then we got Odin's backstory. And Oda's backstory is very much Wano's backstory. We got a lots of lore in this backstory, and considering we got to see him go with the Roger crew and how that worked, we saw his rise to becoming Odin in the first place, and how he decided to take this responsibility. Oh man, even though the Wano stuff was interesting, and then obviously how he got taken out by Kaido, that was dramatic, and how he was a Chad lad. I mean, I feel like the go-to though, the one that was the most interesting part definitely is the Whitebeard and Roger stuff in particular, and how we're learning it through his journal. But the law, oh, I didn't even mention the law part where there was a virus at Law's hometown and everybody basically died. Law wanted to die. He wanted to take out Doflamingo, and then the whole thing with Corazon and how Corazon sacrificed his life for Law, and now Law wants his get back on Doflamingo. If we're talking about the more emotional backstory, it's 100%. It's Law and Doflamingo's backstory. I think that is more emotional. Yes, Odin, Chad lad in that pot of oil for sure. It was emotional, and then obviously the whole time travel stuff. But I don't think it compares to what happened with Law and Corazon. The stuff that matters the most, though, in terms of lore, probably Odin, considering it relates to Roger. And is this where we got Laugh Tale? I believe this is where we got the reveal of Laugh Tale 2 from my memory. So what matters more, the lore, the impact, or the characterization, the emotion? This is a tough one. This is really like, what is your flavor for what you want from a backstory? I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm gonna go Odin. I'm gonna go Odin's backstory. I'm more of a lore guy. I'm more of like, how does this further the narrative that I'm reading or watching right now? And I think Odin's is more impactful. I Odin is not one of my favorite characters. I enjoy Law much more, and I probably enjoy Doflamingo much more. But the amount of information we got, I was locked in. I'm gonna go Odin. That was a tough one. Odin over Law and Doflamingo. Next, we got Big Mom and Sanji. So the Big Mom backstory, short and sweet. We got to see her as Lin Lin. I'll be honest, we've talked about this multiple times. I do think there's a genuine conversation that Big Mom was fumbled in One Piece. As of right now, unless we don't get more of Big Mom, I think her narrative seems kind of scattered. Like, we get interesting pieces of her story scattered in different flashbacks, right? We get child Lin Lin in her own backstory, and the whole thing with was a Mother Caramel and how she ate her like pseudo family. We also get a little bit exposition on how she destroyed a giant village. We don't know how. We don't even know why she's so freaking powerful in the first place. We don't know why her hunger pains make her like a cannibal. Like, we don't get any of that really as of yet. And then recently we got information on how she joined the Rocks Pirates, started her family, got betrayed by Kaido, and getting that one devil fruit that Kaido got. I still feel like there's more to Big Mom. Whereas Sanji, we got two backstories from Sanji. So this is kind of similar, where we got multiple stories about Big Mom scattered throughout. We got two different backstories from Sanji. The first backstory we got is with Zeph, and him and Zeph were stuck on the island. They had no food, and he ended up eating his leg, I believe. Like, it's crazy. And Zeph was starving to death, and then Sanji became indebted to him. Powerful backstory. Nothing crazy, but powerful, that you had to eat human body parts. And then that's not even the worst thing that happened to Sanji. This man Sanji was a whole prince to a little scientific royal family that hated his guts. because he was too human, which turned out to be wrong because he has android powers. Uh, so his original origins was him and the Vinsmokes, and how wasn't like his siblings because he didn't manifest the cyborg android like abilities. So he was bullied consistently by his brothers. His mother, I think died. I believe, from my memory, she died. Then they locked up Sanji in this cage and put like this weird thing on his face, and then his sister let him out. Like, he was treated like garbage. Imagine going from that scenario to the Zeph scenario, and now, like, Sanji's been through a lot, you know. Better backstory between. I think it's clearly Sanji has a better backstory than Big Mom. I think there's still so much we don't know about Big Mom, and that's epitome. That's like a very clear image on the flaws of Big Mom's story so far. So I'm gonna go Sanji has a better backstory. Next, we got Nami versus Koala. I honestly don't remember a lot. Obviously, I heard about what happened with Fisher Tiger, with the Celestial Dragons, how she basically became a slave, how she always smiled. And then you compare that to Nami with her and, oh man, I'm forgetting her mother's name. But they were living on this island. Arlong showed up. Arlong killed her mother, and then he ordered Nami to basically, steal from other crews to pay to buy back the island for him. She had to basically join the crew and build maps for Arlong too. So we got that whole story of like why she got involved with being a navigator, as well as why she was stealing from pirates in the first place and her obsession with money. Sad backstory, straight to the point. Didn't really need much beyond this. Not any bigger narrative because Arlong was taken out pretty quickly in One Piece, like in the first like saga for the most part. Compared to Koala, her backstory relates to Fisher Tiger, one of the most prominent and most important characters in One Piece. Like, she got the more important fishman attached to her backstory compared to Nami. Um, I think Koala's was emotional. Like, obviously Nami's mom dying was emotional, but the big emotion behind Nami's story was after she finally asked Luffy for help in the Straw Hat scene. That was amazing, but that's not part of her backstory. I'm gonna say Koala. I think it just had more important elements, and you could argue that the sad nature of what Koala is going through, especially for a little. I mean, Nami's a little kid too, but yeah, I'm gonna go Koala. Next, we got Luffy, Ace, and Sabo versus Robin's backstory. So Luffy, Ace, and Sabo obviously is the backstory of them on the island together, learning how to get stronger. We eventually saw Sabo's death, quote unquote, and then Ace eventually leaving by himself and becoming a pirate. I'm not going to go too much in depth in the stuff that happened in the light novel with Ace and how he fought Jinbei and joined Whitebeard's crew. I'm going to go based off like the main source material. Whereas Robin, oh my God, Robin, her whole family, her whole group of people on the island, all of them got slaughtered because they knew too much. And then Robin, the whole thing with Jaguar, he got cooked. And then Robin, as a child, had a huge bounty on her head, was called the devil, and had to just be alone moving forward. Hey man, Robin's story hit, man. It hit in so many ways, especially knowing that she was by herself for the longest period of time until she was older, like in a grown adult, ended up joining Crocodile's crew. And fortunately, she met Luffy. I like this. I think we're probably gonna get more. I think you can also bring up the aspect of Sabo getting joining Dragon. That's super important, obviously. But I'm gonna go Robin. I think Robin's backstory is better. Robin's story just your for a character who just joined the crew, new Straw Hat, didn't know why we should care about her. She was formerly a villain. This backstory in combination for her wanting to officially live made Robin a extreme fan favorite. We all locked in Robin. And this was a huge catalyst on the importance of Robin moving forward. A woman who could read the poneglyphs. Yes, the other backstories attached to the most important characters in One Piece. Luffy, the main character, Ace, the son of Roger, and Sabo, the apprentice of Dragon, and the second in command of the Revolutionary Army. They're way more important. But in terms of the narrative and the pieces needed to finally accomplish the goals of One Piece, Robin's arguably the most important character in One Piece right now. Arguably. So I'm going to go Robin. Next, we got Usopp and Kuma, and like I don't need to make an argument between Usopp and Kuma. This is not even a conversation. Yeah, Usopp's a liar. Yeah, Usopp's dad is a deadbeat. His mother died. Sad stuff. But there's levels to sadness, and Usopp ain't competing with Kuma's sadness. Next, we got Chopper and Brook. This is interesting. Very, very depressing. Chopper became a human by chance with the human fruit and was basically casted aside as like a Yeti. People hated him. People called him Bigfoot, threw stuff at him. Was adopted by Heroluk and accidentally killed him. We saw how he became a doctor. We saw how humanity turned on him. Tough stuff for Chopper. And this is a Chopper who became human for the very first time. And this is a Chopper who's basically a little kid. You compare that to Brook. Brook goes out to sea. Now, we're probably going to get more from Brook. So Brook's backstory is probably going to expand with his connection with Gunko. But Brook, by himself for what, like 500 years? Because of his devil fruit, his entire crew dead. All he has is the song. Loneliness for 500 years is tough. So you compare like this old man being alone and everybody dying around him. You compare that to basically a adolescent who's casted aside by humanity, who accidentally killed the only human that loved him. 6'7", you know what I'm saying? This is tough. This is a tough one. For now, I'm gonna go Chopper. I think Chopper's backstory is a bit better. I am cheating a little bit because I do think Brook's backstory will deepen later on because of the Gunko relation. We don't really get the extent of who Brook is. We just know how he ended up in the situation he ended up in. Whereas we like find out Chopper's motivations, why he became a doctor. We find out his viewpoint on humanity and how Luffy changed it. We really get deep on Chopper's character. So I'm going to say Chopper is the better backstory. And to end it, we got Senor Pink versus God Valley. Now, Senor Pink is probably a fan favorite backstory for many. We find out why he dresses up in a baby's outfit because of what happened to his wife and his kid. No, he had no kid, which is why he dressed up as a baby. And his wife was basically gone. But like there's levels to this, and God Valley is clearly better. It's just not. I'm sorry, Senor Pink. You just the RNG is not RNG. All right, round two from the backstories, best backstories in One Piece history. We got Kiros versus Odin. I've already spoken depth about each backstory for the most part. I'm gonna go Odin here. I think Kiros stuff is super sad, definitely more emotional. Um, but I mean the lore and what we find out about Roger's crew has to go to Odin. And I guess the Wano stuff too. Next, we got Sanji versus Koala. Koala, we get introduced to Fisher Tiger, super sad stuff, but the two backstories from Sanji so important. I'm gonna go Sanji here. I'm gonna go Sanji here. He cheats. He got two backstories. Next, we got two heavy hitters. We got Robin versus Kuma. This is a tough one. Because Robin's backstory really set the precipice on like how important the history of One Piece is. Kuma's backstory, in terms of lore, I don't think we got anything deeper in terms of lore and narrative. I mean, we got to see the Buccaneers, right? We got to see how messed up the Celestial Dragons are. And we got a little insight on the Revolutionary Army. But this backstory was mostly just focused on Kuma and his journey. Since as a kid, he was a slave. He finally found love. And then the Celestial Dragons took that from him. And he raised the daughter of someone that took his love of his life from him. And then they wanted to turn him into a rope. Yo, the Celestial Dragons ruined Kuma's life. Kuma does get a little extra, you know what I'm saying, Dave, from God Valley. And then we got to see Kuma do the MVP move with saving Blackbeard. Robin's backstory is so important, and obviously everything that's happened to Robin sucks. But in that time span of what happened to Robin, we get the same thing from Kuma, but we actually got to see how like his life is way worse. Somehow his life is way worse than a child being wanted by the world government and everybody hating her. Somehow his story is worse than her story. I don't know how you could do that, but they did with Kuma. So Kuma's story, worse. Robin's story, bad, but it has so many important long-term implications. But Kuma has done some MVP shit with the helping the revolutionaries, with his relationship with Vegapunk, with saving Blackbeard. This is a tough one. This is comp. This is a heavyweight battle. This is Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. This is 2016 freaking Kevin Durant versus 2016 LeBron. No, that's not comp. No, that is comp. Even though Katie was on the stack squad, you feel me? What's a better comp? Something a little bit more even. It's more like, what's a matchup that was like super competitive? I'm trying to think. Do we get that? Do we get a lot of very, very compy matchups nowadays? It's like very clearly one team or one player better than the other. I don't get a lot of comp nowadays. I will say Kuma's backstory is better. I'm gonna say Kuma's backstory is better. I think it's like Robin's backstory cranked up a notch. So I'm cool with Kuma winning here. He's done way too much. Next, we got God Valley versus Chopper, and shout out Chopper, but there's levels. God Valley. God Valley for sure. Okay, final four backstories, best backstories in One Piece right now. We got some interesting places. We got some interesting decisions to make. We got Odin, Sanji, Kuma, and God Valley. I think a lot of these are very good. I'm not, honestly not surprised that these are, and I'm getting a good sense on what the top five is. So I might make a little quick, little cheeky top five right after this. I think after talking this out, I think I understand what my top five would be. Odin versus Sanji. This is an interesting dynamic. Sanji got two backstories, both of them hit. But Odin's backstory, I'm more invested to the Sanji character than the Odin character. So learning about the growth of Odin, how he became Odin, how he was a snot-nosed brat and then became a strong warrior, all of that was cool. I care about the Sanji stuff way more than that. I'm going to be very clear about that. I care about the Sanji stuff and his family way more about Odin and his family. Just the honest truth. What Odin has, though, that is over Sanji is the bigger lore implications. The Gold Roger, the Whitebeard, the Kaido, the world government, Orochi. So the question is that extra stuff that we learn from Odin's backstory good enough for me to say it's better than Sanji's backstory? I'm going to say it is. It is. It's honestly very impressive if you think about it. We got a whole character arc in the backstory. Regardless of how you feel about Odin, he's a character that's been hyped up the entirety of Wano, and we got to see his entire story in one backstory. You don't really get to see that often. The only other example of that we'll talk about in a second is God Valley. So I think this was Oda first getting in his bag to really dive into a backstory and telling a character story and how that character plays into the overall narrative. So I'm going to pick that one. Funny enough, after he mastered that, he did Kuma's backstory and mastered the importance of a character and diving into the details to make him a fan favorite. That's what he did with Kuma. Then he went nuclear and combined everything he learned about creating Kuma's backstory and Odin's backstory and created God freaking Valley. I think people know where I'm going with this. God Valley is the best parts of both backstories. In how he built up Rocks and told his entire narrative in one backstory, he mastered that from doing the Odin backstory. He mastered it. And then building up a character that everybody rocks with not only Rocks, but I guess Loki too. But then he did something even more unique in creating a tangential character that we learn everything about that character in the backstory. It gave him a good duality between Rocks, the fan favorite that he built up, and use Harold to tell the overall narrative in kin to what's going on right now in Elbaf. God Valley, Oda, he's just cooked crazy. God Valley is better than Kuma's backstory. Sorry. It just has all the emotional appeal. Kuma's stuff is probably sadder than Rocks, than Harold. Yeah. Even though Harold had to kill himself and Rox had to kill himself technically. But the lore implications from God Valley is top notch. It can't be touched, bro. And then finally we have God Valley versus Odin. I'm comfortable in saying God Valley is the best backstory in One Piece history. After going through all these backstories, I don't think we need to make this a debate. I don't think we need to complicate the narrative. I think it's pretty cutthroat. I think it's pretty clear. God Valley is the best backstory in One Piece, period. Now, after going through all of this, I kind of want to do a little practice test before we wrap up this installment of Agenda Piece. And I want to do a little top list of the best backstories. So here's what I'm going to use. I think I've talked myself into this, so I kind of have a good idea who I'd pick. For number one, the God Valley backstory is the best backstory, period. How we built up characters and created a characterization for Rox, which people are saying is already in their top favorites. How it made Harold such a polarizing but such an intriguing character. How we finally got more lore and exposition on not only those two, but also Garp and also Dragon and also the God Knights. Come on. Question is, what is number two? So we got, I would say the top three is Kuma, Odin, and God Valley. I would say entertaining the conversation in top fives. We'll get there. I think the second best backstory is Kuma's backstory. I think it is tough, but I think Odin's backstory didn't have the emotional appeal that Kuma's backstory had, but it did have the lore stuff that I'm very interested in. But I think Oda pretty much perfected characterization and building up a character in the Kuma backstory. And it had some of the most alluded to, not explicitly stated, but very clearly what happened in terms of terrible things that's happened to Kuma. The Celestial Dragons ruined this man's life, and then we got a nice cherry on top with Kuma being the MVP and saving Blackbeard's life. Kuma's him. He just is. Question is, who would I go for the rest of the list? So I'd go number 4 and number 5. We're thinking Sanji. We're thinking Robin. And maybe Law and Doflamingo. I would say number 4 has to be Robin's backstory. Consider how much comp I put Odin and Robin and Kuma's backstories are. I think it's fair to say Robin's backstory is number 4, especially take into all the context and the importance of the historical significance of who Robin is moving forward for One Piece. And then number 5, best backstory in One Piece. I would say Law and Doflamingo. I think it will. I know it lost in the first round, but I think it lost to Odin's backstory, which Odin's backstory beat out Sanji's. It's between Sanji's or Law and Doflamingo's backstory to me for that top 5. And maybe combining both of them is a little cheating, but I feel like their stories so intertwined. So this is what I got for my top 5 backstories in One Piece. Number 5, Law and Doflamingo. 4, Robin. 3, Odin. 2, Kuma. 1, God Valley. That is all we got for Agenda Piece. One Piece chapter is back next week. We'll be talking about the chapters, of course. Appreciate y'all. You have a good one. Take care.